At our so-called annual family brunch, my sister tapped her glass with that smug little smirk. To our sponsor, always paying, never invited. The table burst into laughter. I didn't. I lifted my coffee and said, "Here's to those of you who just got the alert that your mortgage lifeline disappeared." Melissa's phone buzzed first. She looked down, and the smile slipped off her face. A second buzz, her hand tightened around the glass. Then my dad's phone lit up. He scrolled, blinked, shifted in his chair like the air had thinned around him. Suddenly, the room wasn't laughing anymore. That brunch was supposed to be routine. But for me, it was the final performance, my last time pretending their digs didn't sting, their jokes didn't cut, their quiet tax on me didn't drain me. I'd swallowed it for years, letting them mock me while I bankrolled their lives. Not anymore. Melissa's perfect two-story house? That dream collapsed without me. Her patio furniture, her hosting brag? Built on checks I covered every month. My dad's car lease, the one he paraded around in like he earned it? It was my money keeping it alive. They never noticed, because they never asked. They just assumed the safety net would always be there. So I cut the strings the night before. Cancelled every automatic payment I'd been making quietly, without applause, without recognition. Made sure the notifications would hit right in the middle of brunch. Let them toast the family banker one last time, then choke on reality. Melissa disappeared into her kitchen, phone pressed to her face, pacing like a caged animal. Through the window I saw her refreshing the app again and again, as if the numbers would magically fix themselves. She was probably just realizing her mortgage had been riding on me for 13 straight months. That illusion ended today. When she came back, her voice was tight, forced calm, loud enough for the whole table. She asked if I'd heard anything about her lender, if I knew what was happening. I sipped my coffee. You mean besides the text that says your mortgage assistance is gone? The silence was sharp. Melissa scrambled to play victim, saying I should have given her a heads up, that I should have talked to her before pulling the rug out. I asked her one question, when was the last time she called me without asking for money? That shut her down. Then my dad's turn came. He cleared his throat, that faux serious courtroom tone he used when he wanted to sound in control. He said his lease payment bounced, asked if I'd done something. I didn't look up. I stopped paying it. You said you wanted independence. He laughed nervously, tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, reminded me of our agreement. A year ago he promised to pay me back once his real estate project took off. A year passed. No project. No repayment. Just promises. So I reminded him of something he once told me when I was 16 and needed help buying a laptop. Word for word, you want something, you figure out how to get it. That's life. He didn't remember. I never forgot. The table had gone still. No laughter, no fake brunch cheer. For once, I wasn't the quiet one. I was the only one saying the truth out loud. This is just the beginning, I said, calm, steady. You'll finally understand what it feels like to be expected to give everything, and get nothing back. I took another bite of my croissant. No one dared laugh this time. He thought he'd pulled off a deal last year, just a quick favor, a couple of months of help until that rental property he invested in started turning a profit. That was 15 months ago. I kept his lease alive, not because I admired him, but because I didn't feel like watching him crumble. Now? I was ready to. He muttered something I couldn't catch, then drifted down the lawn with his phone to his ear, faking a casual golf chat. He hated being exposed, hated even more when people could see it. Danny, meanwhile, was squirming near the wine cooler. He hadn't been hit yet, but he felt the shadow creeping closer. He glanced at me every few seconds, like waiting for his name to drop. He tried to soften it, leaned in and whispered that he'd always noticed my effort, that he was grateful even if others weren't, that maybe we should talk sometime, just the two of us. I gave him a nod. Nothing more. He knew what that silence meant. What none of them realized was this was only the beginning. I'd spent weeks cutting myself out of their lives, closing accounts, canceling standing orders, stripping permissions they'd never bothered to notice. They were so used to money appearing on cue, they forgot to ask where it came from. I didn't need to raise my voice. No speech, no theatrics. Just coffee and stillness. Silence was enough. In silence, they couldn't predict me, couldn't guilt me, couldn't bend me back into their mold. That's what unsettled them most. Melissa reappeared, jaw locked tight, phone in her hand. She dropped into her chair without a word and stared down at her plate. Whatever conversation she just had cracked the story she'd been clinging to. Dad came back minutes later, mumbling about calling the dealership on Monday. His voice was quieter now, his eyes fixed anywhere but mine. Danny didn't even reach for his food. And me? I leaned back and let it all unravel. The brunch I once paid for was collapsing under its own weight. It wasn't revenge anymore, it was balance. And for the first time, they understood they'd never been holding the reins. Melissa didn't speak for half an hour. Just scrolled furiously, her son tugging at her sleeve until she snapped at him loud enough for everyone to hear. That had never happened before. Dad sat folded in on himself, probably calculating which golf buddy might co-sign his next lease. Pride is heavy, but not heavier than debt. Danny kept trying to keep things light, crypto, sports, music, but nobody took the bait. Every glance slid back to me. He hadn't gotten his alert yet, but the silence pressing in on him was almost louder than a phone buzz. Then the cracks widened. Aunt Carol, always bragging about her spotless credit, let out a sharp little gasp. She whispered that her card had just declined, the one she used for groceries. She looked down at the screen, then up at me. Months back, she'd begged for a one-time bridge when her unemployment dried up. I'd quietly tied a recurring payment to her account. She never knew. Last night, I cut it off. It wasn't about the money, it was about the message. And then, the twist. Melissa's husband Rob walked outside. He wasn't supposed to be there, they'd been on a break 4 months. He bent down, said something low to her, and her face crumpled. She turned on me. Did you tell him? I blinked. Tell him what? That the house is in danger. That I've been taking your help. I shook my head. Didn't need to. Rob subscribed to the same credit monitoring service I used. The second those payments stopped, he would have seen the alerts. They always thought the threat was me speaking. But I never had to. The truth was wired to tell itself once I stepped away. More phones buzzed. My cousin Jenny froze mid-story, her face draining as she stared at her screen. She muttered that something must be wrong. I didn't answer. The brunch had turned into a lineup. Food untouched, drinks melted, the curated Instagram spread rotting in silence. The laughter from earlier might as well have belonged to a different lifetime. Danny was the first to break. He pulled me toward the side gate like we were sneaking out as kids. His voice cracked as he asked if I'd heard anything about a weird flag on his loan application. Probably nothing, maybe something with the crypto startup. He had no idea I'd already seen the alert. He'd used my business name as a reference without asking. I'd removed my name from everything, accounts, guarantees, credit pulls, and while I was at it, I flagged his LLC with 3 bureaus for misuse. His face went pale. He whispered, "You said you believed in my project. I believed in you not dragging me into it without asking." When we walked back, no one spoke. Melissa's kid had disappeared inside, cartoons blaring through the walls. Rob was gone too. Carol typed furiously, probably begging customer service to undo what couldn't be undone. Jenny was still glued to her phone. Dad stared blankly at the table like it might cough up an answer. I let them sit in it. Let the weight press down until they finally realized the safety net was gone. Then I spoke. Calm. Clear. You've all lived under the assumption that I'd never stop, that no matter how little you gave, no matter what you said, I'd always come through. That ends now. This isn't a phase. It's permanent. Melissa's mouth opened like she had something sharp ready to fire back. Nothing came out. I kept going. No loans, no quiet top-ups, no secret rescues. I'd shut every door. Whatever they needed now, they'd have to look elsewhere, or go without. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I didn't shout. I didn't even blink. And they didn't fight me. Not a word. Somewhere between the buzzing phones and the cut-off accounts, the truth had landed. They weren't staring at the version of me they used to know, the one who slipped money into gaps before anyone noticed, who let the jokes pass, who ran the show so smoothly they thought life just fixed itself. That woman was gone. The person sitting there now, they didn't know what she might do. But they were starting to suspect. No one apologized. Not that day. They weren't ready to admit it yet. Still, the way they sat, nervous, watchful, as if I were someone entirely new, was apology enough. The balance had already shifted. Melissa hadn't met my eyes since Rob walked out. Her shoulders had caved in, the posture of someone who knows the fight is already over. Her phone lay face down on the table, quiet, like even it had surrendered. You could see the weight settling, her kid, the bills, the calls waiting for her on Monday morning. Maybe for the first time she was actually feeling what it costs to live in a house you can't afford while pretending you can. Dad hadn't moved either. The man who once barked at waiters and bragged about old-school toughness hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. His car lease would vanish by the end of the month, and he knew it. The silence ate at him. For once in his life, he wasn't the loudest man in the room. Carol stopped pretending too. At first she'd laughed off the card decline like it was some silly glitch. But now she was typing carefully, probably canceling subscriptions or checking balances, trying to patch over the few $100s I'd been funneling her way. She was always proud. Never asked outright. Just dropped hints and waited for me to catch them. I always had, until now. Jenny had slipped inside after claiming she needed to take a call. She hadn't come back. My guess? She finally checked her account and saw that the rent buffer had disappeared overnight. No warning, that was the point. Danny stayed frozen. That was rare for him. Usually he was all energy, pitching a scheme, claiming he was just one break away. Now he just stared at the email from the loan office, the same one I saw when he tried using my business name without permission. He knew I'd burned that bridge. He also knew I wasn't bluffing when I said this was only the start. I stood slowly. No scene, no drama. I drained the last of my coffee, set the cup down, and looked around. "Thanks for brunch," I said. Melissa flinched. Dad flicked his eyes up. No one else spoke. I walked toward the gate. Halfway across the lawn, I heard him. "Hey." Just that. A single word hanging in the air. Not an apology, not even a sentence, just a reach backward, like he wanted to pull me in but couldn't remember how. I kept walking. Sat in my car a moment before turning the key. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was still. Like I'd finally stepped outside the grip they'd kept me in for years. Like I'd unplugged something that was never meant to run this long. They used to call me the sponsor, the one who covered the bill, asked no questions, laughed along even when I knew I was the punchline. But now? They didn't joke around me anymore. They lowered their voices when I spoke. They feared losing me more than they feared asking. They hadn't respected me for giving. They respected me now because I'd stopped. And I liked that better. 5 months later. That brunch was the last time we were all in one place. It left a crater. No invites, no texts, not even sarcastic jabs. Just silence. Maybe they thought I'd crawl back. Or maybe they were finally testing what life looked like without me holding it together. Turns out, they adapted. Melissa sold the house quietly. No Instagram just listed, no big family announcement. She downsized into a condo, no yard, no grand brunches. She picked up a remote customer support job. Not glamorous, but steady. Her kids are in after-school care now, and she finally learned how to use budgeting apps. Rob never returned. Dad had to give up the lease. Not by choice, the dealership forced it. He tried to get another car on credit and was denied. Now he rides the train. I saw him once at a station. He pretended not to notice me. He looked smaller, not in size, but in spirit. The loudest man I'd ever known had gone quiet. Every so often, he sends me a short message. Nothing dramatic, no requests for money. Just, hope you're okay. I'd never gotten that from him before. Carol left her apartment, moved in with a friend across town. She canceled the luxuries she used to brag about. But then she did something unexpected, called me, not to ask for money, but to tell me she'd finally paid down a card. She was cooking at home, saving. She said, thank you. Not for the help, for cutting it off. Jenny picked up 2 part-time jobs. Dog walking, bakery shifts. She used to mock that kind of work. Now she posts about hustle life like it's a badge of pride. She hasn't reached out directly, but she refollowed me on Instagram. That's as close to an apology as I'll ever get. Danny vanished for a while. I assumed the worst. Then weeks later, an alert popped up, he'd used me as a reference on a job app. Not for another half-baked startup, for a real logistics firm. Payroll. Policies. I didn't reply. Didn't have to. Just knowing he was finally standing on his own was enough. And me? I wake without dread. I eat when and how I want. I invest properly instead of patching their holes. My phone stays quiet, no emergencies, no guilt disguised as love. I feel like myself again, for the first time in years. When I do cross paths with them, a store, a sidewalk, once at a distant cousin's party, they're different. No jokes, no smirks. Careful. They ask how I am, and they wait for the answer. It isn't love that keeps them careful. It's respect. The kind that comes from knowing someone finally drew a line, and won't ever let you cross it again. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. And staying done feels right.